Hello dear YouTube Sangha, and welcome to another episode of Delicious Dharma. I am Dharma Peace.
I'm Delicious.
I'm Dharma Sense. Welcome to our channel.
Okay, so today in this episode we will be discussing something called the Five Precepts, also known as the Five Mindfulness Trainings. These things are not exactly like the precepts and the mindfulness trainings are exactly the same, but in Plum Village and Thich Nhat Hanh's tradition, that's how they are approached. And so today we are speaking to you from a new location, Kava, Java.
Drink responsibly.
I think we can go ahead and say that we are located in New Smyrna Beach currently. So yeah, come on by and grab something. They've got all kinds of delicious beverages and fun events every week.
We are not sponsored by them. We just are friends of them. For the record.
But I'd be remiss not to plug a little bit for a friend, Pete. He's the owner, and it'd be just the kind thing to do.
Thanks for allowing us to use such a nice space.
Yeah.
Yes. Shout out to them.
So yeah, again, we're talking about the Five Precepts, and what are the precepts? So, so if we Google the word precept, you might come up with rule or guideline that you follow. But there are various ways that we discuss precepts.
Saying, what are the precepts? Why the precepts?
Yeah.
In the sense that these are basically the foundation of the Buddhist practice.
Yeah.
Right? These are what we essentially vow that we will uphold when we take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma and the Sangha, and the three jewels. And so maybe let's talk a little bit about that, and then get into the five. Also mention that the five that we take as lay Buddhists is different than what monastics vow.
Yeah, they take 108 and think maybe more.
So and this is kind of Buddhism 101. It's sort of introductory Buddhism, and gives a basic sort of infrastructure for us to hang our behavior on.
If I may, too, the most simple reckoning of Buddhism is three things, right? We're going to abstain from doing bad things, we're going to do good things, and we're going to purify our mind.
Yeah.
And so the way that we stop doing bad things is to follow the precepts.
Yes.
Right? And so that's the step one, is follow the precepts.
And even though there's nuance to it, and it's open to sort of different interpretation in terms of the syntax, etc., they're basically pretty common sense guidelines that anybody can follow. In fact, a lot of people follow without having taken refuge in the Buddha.
Yeah, at the heart of it all is the sense of non-harm, or ahimsa, right? Not committing harm to others.
And promoting well-being in others.
Exactly.
There's always the affirmative, as Ocean was saying.
Yeah. And I wrote a list in affirmative context, okay? So, and that would be the first mindfulness training, or the first precept is to affirm life and not to kill. The second is affirm generosity and not to steal or take what is not given. The third would be affirm true love and abstain from sexual misconduct. The fourth is affirm loving speech and deep listening and abstain from lying and divisive speech. And fifth is to affirm mindfulness and mindful consumption, and abstain from unhealthy consumption.
Right.
I like the affirmation use of it, because I do affirmations with my students in the school. We do affirmations where I don't have to enforce guidelines by saying don't do that. I say do that. Do the thing that we promised we would do.
Yes, exactly. That's a really good way of putting it. It's because something that I guess Christians might relate to with the Ten Commandments is it's telling you to stop doing things, whereas it should be telling you what to do rather than what not to do. And by that way, you inherently learn what not to do just by doing the right thing.
Right.
And so if you can teach people how to do the right thing, you stop doing the wrong thing. I mean, that's just kind of my common sense way of approaching that, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
If you start from a basic sort of, I like to, as an affirmation, say, and it's kind of foundational to my practice, is may my life be a benefit to all living beings. It's a very general sort of statement.
Absolutely, yeah.
That the precepts all can be sort of thrown into that same bucket.
Right, and the other aspect about it is trying to remember his name. There's a monastic out there on Buddhism channel on YouTube. He talks about the Five Precepts as being not being constraints, but being a means of liberation. As a matter of fact.
Right.
And people think, we get in that mindset of like, oh well, I'm constraining myself if I set myself these standards and rules. But it's like if we stop doing things we regret doing, then it liberates us from the regrets and from like, oh man, now I have to say sorry, or I have to.
It's how you live a good life and be a good person. I mean the precepts that we've listed, they're all common sense things that most of us are probably making an effort to follow anyway. Like
they promote joy and happiness.
Yeah, I don't want to kill anyone. I don't want to steal. I don't want to hurt people's feelings or sexual assault or any of these things because I know that it causes suffering. I don't want that. I don't want that for anyone else.
The Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh wrote a book called "For a Future to Be Possible." Commentaries on the 5 wonderful precepts, and actually he's got the mindfulness trainings right here. So he says, for reverence for life, that would be the first mindfulness training. Aware of the suffering caused by the destruction of life, I vow to cultivate compassion and learn ways to protect the lives of people, animals, plants, and minerals. I am determined not to kill, not to let others kill, and not to condone any act of killing in the world, in my thinking and in my way of life.
It brings to mind the sort of, I think, for me, one of the crucial teachings of Buddhism, and I've learned it from Thich Nhat Hanh, is the idea of interbeing. The idea that we are all connected, right? That life is one, truly, that we are all interrelated. Nobody is innately existing on their own. Everybody has parents. There's causes for everything. And out of this concept is born compassion, is born understanding that for me to be happy, you also need to be happy. And if I suffer, others suffer. If others suffer, I suffer.
That's right.
And
Thich Nhat Hanh talks in more than one book that happiness is not an individual matter.
Yeah.
So if you're, intuitively that makes sense because if I'm in a room with a bunch of angry people.
Wait, can you say that again?
Happiness is not an individual matter.
right.
But like I was saying, that is intuitive. If you're in a room with a bunch of angry and hateful people, how is that going to make me feel when I'm trying to be happy? It's going to obviously drag me down, right?
Right.
The only way that I can be happy is for them to start being happy.
Right.
Yeah, and it's like what I think the dynamic there is other regarding, meaning like, okay, so what I mean by that is that we understand that we have a relationship with the so-called other, and we want to be mindful of others around us as basically that we are not separate, we are not one, not two, right, as it were in the Zen text.
Right.
And Roshi was just talking about what you said, Sense, and you weren't there, but Roshi was saying exactly this thing that he's saying right now. Roshi was telling the whole Sangha about interbeing, and
no separation between self and other.
Yeah, so the interconnectedness is a major aspect of this.
Now, we don't want to get a little too woo and say, like, we understand that we all lead our own individual lives.
Right.
But we are interrelated.
Do you want to talk about generosity?
Yeah,
the second precept or mindfulness training. Generosity. Aware of the suffering caused by exploitation, social injustice, stealing, and oppression, I vow to cultivate loving kindness and learn ways to work for the well-being of people, animals, plants, and minerals. I vow to practice generosity by sharing my time, energy, and material resources with those who are in real need. I am determined not to steal and not to possess anything that should belong to others. I will respect the property of others, but I will prevent others from profiting from human suffering or the suffering of other species on earth.
I had that written down too.
Yeah.
That's way more in depth than just don't steal, right?
Yeah.
It really is.
Well, theft has many forms, right?
Greed, basically.
Yeah.
It's like the hindrance that's preventing us from really becoming truly generous.
Yes.
And causes us to break this precept.
Yeah, that's right. Like, so again, like the first one would involve aversion, killing, and then greed is here, right? The greed and
Right. Wanting more things that you think will make you happy, but really you're just causing suffering for people.
yeah,
Right.
and again, it's like it stems from just like, is this how we would like to be treated? You know,
Right.
is this the golden rule? Like, and we know that it causes us suffering. That's something that the Buddha had actually said kind of verbatim when it came to, it was a sutta of the bamboo grove or bamboo gate, the people of the bamboo gate. It talks about this as like, you wouldn't want anyone to do this to you, would you?
Right.
And it was
Yeah.
kind of
It's
like
the golden rule.
And
Yeah.
it's like I heard my own like teacher talk during that sutta. I was like, that's how I talk to my students. I'm like, well, would you want me to take your things? You want me to like?
Right.
Suppose
It's like,
I
mean, even Jesus would say this: "Do
Yes.
unto others as you would have
Absolutely.
them do unto you," and that
Right.
is intuitive, isn't it?
Right.
I mean,
That's
I don't
why
want to be
golden rule.
treated this way. Why
That's
would
why
I do
it is
this
the
anyway?
golden.
Going on from Thich Nhat Hanh's
Yep.
his work, he does extend it out a little further than just taking, stealing. Like if greed is like chasing after fame or chasing after wealth or chasing after power or sensual pleasure, you're never going to find happiness there.
Yeah.
True happiness
Yeah.
is
It might be happiness, but it's not real, lasting, quality happiness.
Absolutely, yeah.
Short-lived, and then you experience the fruit of that misdeed.
mhm.
And there's also the sense of, you know, again, where how it's worded by the Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh and in Plum Village context of not appropriating, not exploiting, you know, not taking advantage of others. Because that is a that sort of vision of theft is not readily apparent to those who, you know, maybe there's a like a there's a little bit of an ability to see things protracted, to see like the pernicious harm that is done
Right.
by, you know, certain actions. But the Buddha, you know, says, you know, people commit wrongdoing, not thinking any harm will come to them, but drop by drop is the bucket filled, right? So that is how
Right.
evil accumulates.
Yeah.
Now, evil we mean by that we mean like ignorance, or like rather than like, you know, that.
Yeah, there's not some demon that's going to come
Right,
and
no,
take
not
over your
demonic
mind.
evil,
So,
yeah.
I like that phrase, drop by drop is how the bucket is filled.
That's right,
That's right.
and that's in the Dhammapada.
So there's some alignment with the Noble Eightfold Path, and I think this precept aligns with both right action and right livelihood. Livelihood is well, we earn our living. And quoting Thich Nhat Hanh, I am committed to practicing a livelihood that helps reduce the suffering of others and reverses the effects of global warming. So, plug for that.
Yes.
Yes. And if you have watched your video about environmentalism, Environment 101, you would see that we also care about that too.
Yes.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That, I mean, I know that he's, you know, the Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh really did care about the well-being of all beings, and that right there is an expression of that sort of sentiment. And thanks for sharing that. So, if we could, we maybe move on to the third mindfulness training, which is sometimes called true love, sometimes called sexual responsibility. In this case, it's more direct to the point of, well, not harming others. So, aware of the suffering caused by sexual misconduct, I vow to cultivate responsibility and learn ways to protect the safety and integrity of individuals, couples, families, and society. I am determined not to engage in sexual relations without love and a long-term commitment to preserve the happiness of myself and others. I am determined to respect my commitments and the commitments of others. I will do everything in my power to protect children from sexual abuse and to prevent couples and families from being broken by sexual misconduct. And I love the part where he includes children there, because that's like one of the critiques I have of early Buddhism is that very rarely do children actually feature in the concerns of the monastics. Of course, they cared about children. They, like the Buddha's son Rahula is brought up, but it's like very scarce. But in our modern day, Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh was sharing some serious insight and wisdom by including that. So nod to that.
This precept, I think all of these are very intuitive. This one in particular, it's like, I don't want to cause suffering. I don't want to hurt someone, especially when you're pertaining to such a vulnerable thing as sex. Especially, like you said, to protect children, because sexual misconduct regarding kids is unfortunately a little more common in the world than I would like. All kinds of sex related to minors. And so, we should make an effort to try to alleviate that suffering.
Yes.
And we're speaking specifically here of sexual conduct, but the precept also expands to the violation of anyone's rights in any regard. It emphasizes sexuality, but it's any sort of violation of someone's rights.
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad you said that, because there is I come from the lineage of Pure Land Buddhism, but most, like, let's say Eastern Buddhism, and like that relates to Zen and Mahayana, there are very open discourses about and regarding LGBTQ people, and basically the discrimination felt by them, their expressions of intimacy. That inclusivity is there in today's Buddhism as well. There's often this question of, like, by sexual misconduct, do you mean, like, anything related to LGBTQ? And it's a lot of Buddhist communicators say, to be very clear, saying no, we're not talking about that.
Yeah.
But for monastics, sexuality at all
is off the table
in
the first place.
Yeah. So
that's a good thing. A good point that you bring up. Early Buddhism doesn't really have anything to say about gay or lesbian kind of conduct, but I don't think it matters, because in our modern day, we should, as long as we are abiding by this law of love and like mutual respect in two consenting adults, I don't think it should matter if you're
recognized by family and friends, long-term deep commitments.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and there's this expression in Buddhism where you treat others as your personal siblings, like your sisters, or even your parents, your mothers. So as men, we are told to think in that sense, and other men as brothers, that sort of thing. In the historical context of the Buddha and people of northern India, there are lots of different expressions of sexuality that are shown. It's just not in the suttas, because it's just not the place for it. But culturally, we know that there's been even recognition of a third so-called gender, or things of that nature, where there's no discrimination towards any sort of gender identity. There's no discrimination towards sexual orientation. That is a modern construct for India, as it were.
Right. In general, we are taught inclusiveness and not discrimination.
Yeah, indeed.
Right? And in fact, that would lead to, like, we're talking about, no bad sexual conduct or sexual misconduct. But the affirmative side to that is recognizing that the body and mind are one.
Yeah.
And then so we want to cultivate loving kindness. We want to cultivate compassion, joy,
Absolutely.
Inclusiveness, etc.
Yeah.
Well, that's not to say that sex is bad either, though, because I
No,
think a lot of people,
no.
some people might look at that and think, oh,
Right, that's not what we're saying at all.
It's not necessary to be celibate.
Right. No, it's not.
Sex is necessary.
We understand it's a
reproduction, obviously.
natural
Yeah,
drive.
exactly.
It's part of every human being. And you're going to experience, sexual desire in your life.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's very, very normal.
It's
natural thing. I think it even has a word in Sanskrit. It's called
Vira. Vira?
Yes.
Well, Vira is the
Vira.
Sexual energy.
The type of sexual energy.
Because when I think about this precept, I think of the term kama, which means lust. But then there's
Kama Sutra.
Yeah.
Right.
But
And that's a big distinction.
Vira is an energy.
Right.
Yeah. Vira
Lust and love are two different things.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's right. And like we were talking about this morning how the Buddha subverted Vira, like how Vira traditionally meant like a masculine, like let's say, like a machismo, and then the Buddha just kind of said, well, we have this energy within us. Let's use that for right mindfulness and right
Right.
concentration.
Yeah. That's the thing is that you can have all of the sexual energy in your body, but use it for something that's a little bit more utilitarian than just to go out and have sex with people.
And just don't forget that it's an energy. It's energy, right? You get motivated to do something. If you can transform it, then you have more energy.
That's the cool thing about energy is that you can transform it. It won't be destroyed, right? Because there's that law, but you can be transformed into some other kind of energy.
If you transform it into loving kindness, you also apply it to yourself.
Yes, indeed, yeah, and also it also for
and your enemies.
Yes.
Difficult, that one.
Hard to do, but we
try it anyway. Anyway.
Well, thank you, brothers. Now the fourth precept or mindfulness training is deep listening and loving speech. Right? So, aware of the suffering caused by unmindful speech and the inability to listen to others, I vow to cultivate loving speech and deep listening in order to bring joy and happiness to others and relieve others of their suffering. Knowing that words can create happiness or suffering, I vow to learn to speak truthfully with words that inspire self-confidence, joy, and hope. I am determined not to spread news that I do not know to be certain, and not to criticize or condemn things of which I am not sure. I will refrain from uttering words that can cause division or discord, or that can cause the family or the community to break. I will make it all efforts to reconcile and resolve all conflicts, however small.
This is so incredibly relevant to today, especially in America.
Yeah.
Oh my God!
Yeah, I know. Like in this sensational, like two-party world that we live in.
Right.
Yeah.
Everyone is so quick to condemn the other person. Oh, like this person did this and this person did that, instead of trying to.
I am always guilty of it. I'm just being honest because I always feel like there is a better alternative. There, like, people choose like ignorance over wisdom, but then it's like, well, I'm not those people, so I don't know what they're thinking, and when you go and berate somebody for something they believe, then you burn the bridge. Then
I don't find it productive to do that kind of thing either. It's like, especially if someone is really passionate about something and I go and start wagging my finger at them like I know better. It's like, now I just created an enemy. Right. And I've made things worse in the world.
It's like that Native American, I want to say, analogy of feeding the wolves, and you're like feeding the angry wolf.
It's like feeding the trolls.
Feeding the trolls.
Right.
Loving speech sometimes it might not seem affectionate, right? It might not seem like the spoonful of sugar that we want to convey, right? Like sometimes we get into a tiff or something, or somebody needs to be stern, and just to prevent harm and prevent, like, we can see where something is going. As long as we are mindful and we are almost certain that is, certainty is not really a given, but if we have experience and wisdom to see where someone is headed, sometimes we have to be stern and intervene. Like, especially as a teacher with students, like children.
Sometimes you have to be stern, and I think it's necessary, and that's part of your expression of love. Is that, like, I care about you, I see you're doing something that you shouldn't, and I want to help.
Right.
Right.
So it's about, and again, it's about the intention. If you're doing it out of hatred, that's one thing. If you're doing it to help someone, that's another.
I grew up in an era playing sports where all my coaches yelled at me all the time. But I knew that their intention was wholesome, and I knew that they wanted the best out of me, and I knew that that's just part of being a coach in sports. And so I never took it as aversion or personal or in any sort of way, but it was definitely stern speech, right? But you can understand the intention, and so much of these precepts are what is our intention behind them, because we're not perfect, we're not saints, we're not going to practice these perfectly all the time, but what is our intention behind it?
There was a time when I was I was kind of raising my voice, trying to motivate my students to do certain drills for soccer, and then I said something like, it was supposed to be a joke, but it was mistaken. It was
Okay.
like, I said, okay, like, are all of you like iPad kids? And like, just kind of like, you're not all iPad kids, are you? And then, like, you know, that. So later on, a student was like, why are you being so harsh on us, coach? And I was like,
It's like,
that
sounds
was,
like you're the iPad kid I was talking about.
yeah, right. And it was like, to be perfectly straight about that, I never intended to hurt anyone's feelings. I didn't want to make anyone upset. I was just trying to motivate some action. I am just trying to, you know, get everybody to on the same page and motivate you. I want to motivate you. That's my intention. But I'm sorry that you felt that way.
Right.
And then, like, you know, and then after that, I overheard them say, I didn't expect him to apologize.
But that's another thing too,
Yeah.
is that like
Intentions
obviously you're gonna like break this precept at some point. You're gonna get angry. Someone's gonna
Yeah.
say something you don't like. You're
Yeah.
gonna snap. It's gonna be heat of the moment thing. But then later on, when you recognize, hey, I like went way too far, you can come back and apologize.
You can come back.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
And that's the takeaway right there.
Yeah.
Is that you can come back and also commit to self-improvement. And but I want to invite Bell for that one.
Yeah, that's a good one for the bell. That really is the crux of the practice, is recognizing when we fail and coming back to it. And coming back sooner, recognizing sooner, and all the time. And
I could not have said it better myself. Because like people think the Noble Eightfold Path is just, oh, I walk straight dead on and I never make a mistake.
I'll be enlightened
Really?
next week.
Exactly. It's like, really, haven't you been a human for long enough to know that that's just
Right.
not how anything works?
There's a lot of deprogramming that has to go on.
The Noble Eightfold Path is more like this, even though
Yeah.
it's called the middle way.
For sure.
Yeah.
You're constantly veering off until you, oh, wait a minute, that's not it, I gotta come back.
And this precept is commonly just don't lie, right?
Yeah.
But it's so
Yeah.
much more than that.
Yeah.
It's like right speech. It encompasses promoting well-being with our speech.
I have to say, I don't like it when it's termed that way, like don't tell lies or don't lie.
Yeah.
Because it omits so much. It's like, well, that's a lie of its own. Like,
Yeah.
Because there's slander. There's the way that you, like, just unmindful speech.
There's-
Just saying things that are
There's gossip.
incorrect.
Speech.
Yeah.
Gossip.
Idle speech.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of, like, don't lie, it kind of, like, negates the utility of, like, if I need to lie in order to protect myself or my family from a harmful situation,
Right.
that's more
Yeah,
important
yeah.
to
Right,
me,
right,
you know?
right,
Again, it's all about your intentions. And
right. And you have to apply common sense.
Right. And the crux is not to harm, right? To commit to non-harm.
Exactly.
That's really the right intention there.
My SD card's filled up on the camera, so we're switching to iPhone. Hopefully this isn't an abrupt change for y'all.
Yeah.
But let's get back into the
I think it'll
fifth
be
training.
Diet for a Mindful Society. That is the fifth and final mindfulness training or precept. Aware of the suffering caused by unmindful consumption, I vow to cultivate good health, both physical and mental, for myself and my family and my society by practicing mindful eating, drinking, and consuming. I vow to ingest the only items that preserve peace, well-being, and joy in my body, in my consciousness, and in the collective body and consciousness of my family and society. I am determined not to use alcohol or any other intoxicant or to ingest foods or other items that contain toxins such as certain TV programs, magazines, books, films, and conversations. I am aware that to damage my body or my consciousness with these poisons is to betray my ancestors, my parents, my society, and future generations. I will work to transform violence, fear, anger, and confusion in myself and in society by practicing a diet for myself and for society. I understand that a proper diet is crucial for self-transformation and for the transformation of society. That's a long one.
Yeah, so this one is long, but
Yeah.
I think it's necessary because what we take in is going to determine what we put out. Right?
Yeah, you
So-
are what you eat.
Exactly.
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, in every manner of speaking, if I'm constantly watching news that is like destructive and sensational and, you know, right after, then how does that make me feel? Well, it's going to make me feel more anxious and scared.
So
right?
when we say consuming, we're not just talking about eating or drinking. We're talking about our five senses.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Well said. Second.
Yeah, so we consume with all the senses, right? We have, thank you, Dharma Sense. that we consume with all the senses. So therefore, we need to have a mindful approach to what we put into our surroundings. Like sometimes we can't help what we consume necessarily, but we can work to transform it, right? And try to mitigate harm. What I do know, Dharmotion, is that the Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh actually had concern for living beings, and especially animals.
Mm-hmm.
He did at some point talk about like even eating an egg that was laid by a chicken in a factory farm somewhere. That eating that egg has all of the pain and suffering of that chicken. Right. That was he described.
And you can taste it too, like. Free range eggs, people say, oh, it tastes so much better. Well, why do you think that is? It doesn't. It's not being pumped out of a chicken at 1,000,000 miles per second, where they're just forced to. It's a lot of stress on their body, and it affects the quality of the food. And when you ingest that, you're consuming all of the hormones and all of the
the stress
hormones, the bad energy. It affects your physical and mental health.
When you contemplate interbeing, as we've been talking about, you can sort of see what you're consuming, where it comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. No. Again, interbeing, that is like that's the sort of crux there, right?
Yeah.
Right. This is a little bit more challenging, in my opinion, in the sense the idea of consumption, because we by default have to consume. We have to eat to survive. So we are consumers. But we want just to be mindful about it, right? And intentional in our consumption.
Yeah, discerning, right? Discerning is another big word for that. Like, discern what we are.
We want to preserve peace, promote joy, promote well-being with our consumption.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so that, in a sense, today, I think the bigger issue currently is about media consumption, right? Like, we try really hard to just I don't know, like filter the media we consume, try to make it like I try very much just to consume media in a way that's like it's not bifurcated into factional discussion. At the same time, it is kind of important to have a concern for all beings like to have, so there has to be like that sense of right intentions, right there.
You just don't want to be consuming like toxic media all the time. And like this is one of the reasons why I deleted Instagram. I was like, I'm so sick of seeing all this stupid crap, and then it's all so useless, so substanceless. It's like, Becky, you went on vacation, had a good time. That's great. I'm happy for you. But then the comments are all the comments are unwholesome about the things that this other person are doing. Yeah. And I just don't want to consume that. I just want to kind of not worry about that kind of thing and focus on what really matters to me.
Yeah, it's even in the suttas that you don't want to consume or partake in unwholesome conversations even.
That's right. You have the option to just walk away.
Yes.
People forget about that.
Yeah.
When you're online having an angry conversation with Joe Schmo, just hit the X button on Reddit or on 4chan or whatever you're on. Like, just go do something else.
Never mind trying to disabuse the term that I was using earlier. Disabuse people of the views that they have, like especially online, because good luck with that. If you can do that
online.
If you do that, we'll give you the Nobel Prize because there's no such like I don't think has there ever been a person that's come around by being told they were wrong when they were passionate about a topic.
I work in sales. I work in solar, and in my sales training, one of the first teachings that I've ever received is always agree. You never tell a customer no, they're wrong. Instantly, you will make an enemy. You agree, oh yeah, and then you show another way around.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, I agree. What about this?
I agree. It's this other thing that contradicts what you're saying.
It's like
it's just a skillful way of communication where you're including the other person You're not being condescending in any kind of way.
Yeah.
You're giving validity to the fact that they have an opinion that maybe you're not in tune with. You have a different idea. But just to tell somebody flat out that they're wrong, nobody likes to hear that.
No.
Instantly, a wall will go up, and they will fight tooth and nail to prove themselves right, even if they know they're wrong, because now the ego is involved. And
I think it depends on the circumstance, though, because we do eventually need to be stern, like how what Peace was talking about.
Yeah.
So if someone's like, "Hey, I'm gonna go," maybe not get too controversial, but I'm gonna go cause harm to someone. I don't want to be too specific, because
Yeah.
Immediately, if your reaction isn't no, you should not do that.
well, that right.
You know, like
Okay, that's an right. It is circumstantial to a point.
But
right.
Like if we're talking about trying to like disabuse people of like harmful ideas, we need to take a stance that says like we're not going to allow anyone to do that. But and of course the circumstance of being a salesman is a little different than like day-to-day interactions.
For sure.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that you need to be discerning in the situation for like when is it appropriate and skillful and necessary to really like kind of play hardball.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Give you another example. Peace has been studying Buddhism for a long time. Ocean and I are much newer to the practice. We will attend service, sit down, have lunch together afterwards, talk about the Dharma, talk about the different teachings. We don't just outright tell each other, "No, you're wrong. You don't know anything." Talking about,
yeah, it's usually a little more concordant than that.
Right.
Yeah,
We're gonna, build on each other, build on the conversation, and try to arrive at some sort of agreement if we can.
Traditionally, the reckoning of the fifth precept is that I'm not going to consume intoxicants specifically.
As in alcohol, yeah.
And we didn't really touch on that much, but
Right.
In a modern kind of reckoning, if you're just a lay person, it's safe to say that what that means for us is that even though I'm completely sober, I don't do any drugs or alcohol, and I think that that's what we should strive for for serious practitioners. For someone who's a little less committed, that just means if you can drink a little bit, but with mindfulness, to not get drunk. And if you take a prescription that's from a doctor because, let's say you need painkillers because you've got a severe chronic pain, I think that that's okay, but as long as you do it with mindfulness according to your doctor's orders.
Right.
So it shouldn't be a hard and fast, like, never do this thing.
Right.
Yeah, and it has this connotation of what weakens the mind. Like, so it's a pamadatana, means anything which destroys mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
So like, so a lot of this, like, even our Thai or our abbot would say this, like, to refrain from ingesting or taking intoxicants that weaken the mind. So there you can see that there's a little bit of a leeway to, like, especially for lay people, to excuse, maybe drinking alcohol every once in a while socially, or
Right, you just don't want it to hinder your ability to be mindful, and you want to still have heedfulness to be able to recognize what am I doing and what are its consequences, because otherwise you're going to break the other precepts.
Right.
If you're getting hammered drunk every single night, how can I reasonably control the things I'm saying and doing?
And in fact, historically, that is the reason for this precept. This precept, according to my studies, came later than the others were written in the suttas.
That's
shortly
right,
after the death of the Buddha.
He's absolutely right.
And the fifth didn't come in until much later.
Yeah.
As a way to sort of make sure that everybody is in the mental capacity to be able to practice the other precepts.
That's right. Yeah. The first four feature in the earliest form in the sutta from the bamboo the people of the bamboo gate, and then the fifth comes up in an extract. Like,
one other interesting thing that I thought Ty had mentioned when we took refuge.
our abbot.
Ty, our abbot, that when we took refuge, we were really required only to profess one of the precepts for officially becoming Buddhist.
That's right, which I think is very interesting. I'm not going to say whether I truly disagree or agree with that, because that's his decision. But I think that all of us should strive to practice all of them anyway, even if we don't take that vow.
Each precept in mindfulness training is an exercise. It's a commitment to a practice, and if you could just commit to one, at least you're committing to doing something. You're on the right path.
Yeah,
That's right.
and it sort of emphasized for me the suggestiveness of the Buddhist teachings versus the dogma.
Oh,
of it.
right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
That's true. It's
Absolutely.
more like, hey,
Yeah.
this is something that we want you to do because we see that it has benefits and that you will have a happier life. But we're not going to force anything on you.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
because it's a path to liberation, so you can't make a path towards liberation with I don't know, guardrails and just that are confining.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense to force people towards liberation, because how is it liberation now?
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
But these are the closest that we have to commandments in the Buddhist teaching.
Yeah.
That's
you
right.
can compare them to that, but again, it's like.
But it's not the same.
It's not really
it's
the
the
same?
closest comparison.
Yeah.
I would say.
Right.
Yeah. So I think maybe we can conclude that the precepts and the mindfulness trainings are essentially, they're meant to show us how to practice, right? The way to be wholesome, the way to there are clear guidelines that we could point to and say, well, I'm doing proper conduct right now. This is the conduct of our practice, right?
It's something to keep in mind, to say, this is my commitment to live a good life. This is my commitment to prevent suffering.
Right.
And
it works.
Yeah.
It really does promote happiness. It really does promote joy. It really does promote well-being. When you're mindful about your own consumption, when you're mindful about how you're talking to others, when you're mindful about what you're just doing in the present moment, you can just feel better yourself and be of more benefit to others that you're around.
Yeah.
I mean, when you follow these precepts, it has a lot of benefits. And for the first thing is that you're going to have better relationships with people. By following the precept to not lie and to not steal, you're going to have good relationships with people.
Yes.
Now you're practicing mindfulness.
Right.
Your
You're trustworthy.
communication.
You're dependable.
Yeah.
People can take you at your word.
I guess if you've made it to the end of this video,
Yeah. Sadhu to you guys.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
so I just have to
See you next time.